Okay, with that, I think we've done this last time and just go around the room and your name and which of the committees you're on. So we all have a quick recollection. And I'll start with you on Zoom. And for us, Lisa, you're up in the corner, so we'll start with you.
Always in the corner. Bad girl, yeah. Lisa Kerr, I'm on the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Keith?
Keith Leiden, I'm on the Herbsworks team.
Great. Anna, Mickey? Yeah.
Mickey Moritz, I'm on Planning Commission and I'm in Nehalem at my kids' soccer camp. So I will probably have my screen off most of the time.
Okay. Alicia?
Alicia Blaylock, Design Review Board.
Clay?
Good evening. I'm Clay Newton. I am on the Planning Commission.
Aaron?
Good afternoon. I guess good evening now. Aaron Matusik, and I'm on the Planning Commission.
Charles? Charles?
I think Charles is logged in. When I logged in, I had a little trouble. I think he may be on another link. Let me see if I can see him again here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Charles is logged in on another, maybe an older link that was sent out earlier. I don't know if anyone has
see him.
texted.
I see his picture. Charles?
His eyes are blinking.
Charles, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Charles?
Doesn't seem to.
Can you hear us?
If you can hear us.
Well, I'll start for in here and we'll see if we can connect. So I'm Sam, I'm the mayor. Robin?
Robin Risley, council.
Brandon Ogilvy, City Council.
Planning.
Mike Bates, Planning Commission.
You're it.
I'm Marcy McAnally with the Herbsworks team.
Jeff Adams, Community Development.
Robert St. Clair, City Planner.
Rusty Barrett, IT.
Mike Morgan, DRB.
Daryl Johnson, Planning Commission.
Nancy McCarthy, City Council.
Mike Benefield, City Council.
Okay, now we remember who everybody is. I'll jump right into it and we'll let Jeff get us started.
Yeah,
Marcy?
hand it over to Marcy.
Marcy.
And you're ready to hand it over to me right now?
Yep.
All right then. I'm going to stand over here. Thanks for being here this evening, and thanks for having me here again. I'm going to go through a presentation about the code audit that we're working on. Code audit project is an ongoing effort, and if we could just pull up the first slide. So the agenda for tonight is to go over an update of the code audit. That work is going on in the background, but of course there's some other interesting things that are happening in the foreground. The village character survey went out, and I'm really happy to say we had almost everybody take it. And also will mention at this moment that we plan to provide an opportunity for the public to take the village character survey as well. I'm going to talk about the results. And then I'm going to give a little bit of 3 examples of kind of a reality check about how your zoning code mostly don't support, provisions do not support some of the desires for a village character. We're going to actually break into, we'll talk more about the logistics of this. So if we could go to the first slide, actually this 3rd slide. So as you remember, the project objectives for the code audit is review and assess the community development ordinance, or the CDO, in comparison to the comprehensive plan. Our job is specifically to address how the plan and the CDO do not provide mutual support in furthering the community's vision, and actually outline and detail the various ways to fix it. The fixes themselves are not part of this effort right now, but identifying all of the problems is. The code audit project includes 4 tasks. They're scheduled to be completed before the end of 2022. And it's a little hard for you to see that schedule, but we're only in the first square right now. We're having these joint sessions to keep you up to date on the code audit, but also because there were some more urgent amendments that need to take place. That's the reason why we gathered the joint commission. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm actually going to turn this first part over to Keith to present about the code audit issues that he is reviewing. Keith, are you ready?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as we got into the code issues, it struck us that we really have 4 general categories, and we are thinking as we go through this, we'll think of our what we find in our recommendations in terms of these 4 general categories of issues. These are ranging from the most simple clerical to probably the most complex policy. And we'll use those as an organizing principle. We're proposing to do that for the code audit. Next slide, please. So the first one, clerical, by that we're meaning, we're talking about things that are minor mistakes and errors that can be corrected, corrections that can be made or changed without really any issues related to the other 3 categories. So examples of what we mean by clerical, here are a couple things that I found in the code so far. One is in your definitions section, you have some terms, not very many, but you have a few that are used in the definitions, but then you find the term nowhere in the code. So that would be an easy example of, well, either decide you want to use it or delete it, and that would be a simple fix. One thing that you do in your code that's a little bit unique compared to many other ordinances is you assign a specific section number to each defined term. And that can be cumbersome sometimes when you're wanting to amend the code, add another definition and so forth, because then you have to renumber your entire definition section. So that might be something that the city considers to simplify that. And then, as always, just checking for missing, incorrect, or outdated code references or references to the ORS and so forth that you might need to change. So those would be examples of clerical. Next slide, please. So by structural and organizational changes, we're talking about issues like how the plan and the code are organized and how they complement one another. And so how you can read the plan and then go to the code and understand where those relationships lie. And also we have something we've found, I think we've mentioned this before, is some of the content in the plan is really reads like a regulation. It's very specific, talks about who's going to do what the standards are and so forth. And that's usually not what you find in a comprehensive plan. That's usually what you have in the code. So that would be something else that would be an organizational issue to think about. So another example in looking at the plan organization is your plan starts out with an introduction and then a vision statement. And then it goes to specific policies about different areas in the city, the downtown, Tolovana, et cetera. And then it goes back to general citywide policies and ambitions. And something that you might consider there is sticking with the general and working to the more specific as you read through the plan as another organizational idea. As far as the CDO is concerned, most ordinances will have the different chapters of the code organized into usually what they call articles. So you'll have groups of code chapters that have a relationship or serve a similar purpose put together in an article, and then you have the chapters under those. Your code does not have that. You just have the chapters starting from one and you go down to the other. And the potential benefit with having articles is it's a little easier to track the code. It's a little easier to read in the code. So you would have, for example, you would have one article with some of your general provisions. Maybe the definitions would be in there. You'd have another section or article for procedures. What are our review procedures for different types of cases and so forth? Another article would be all the base zones together. Another one would be all the overlay zones. Then you could have another article for all of your development standards and so forth. So it can make the code a little bit easier for everybody to follow because they know what article they're supposed to go to find those kinds of regulations. Let's see. Oh, another organizational idea, getting back to the definitions, is sometimes it's helpful to have definitions that are common, grouped into subsections. So right now you have all of your sign definitions together under signs, and then you have subsections under that. But you might consider having something for all the different land use types and definitions have in one place. You might find some others that would be useful to have in one place as opposed to simply listing everything alphabetically. So if you're looking for different definitions of land uses, you might be up in the C's and then you're down in the S's and so on. So it just makes it easier to follow. Next slide, please. As far as administration goes, we have different procedural tracks and standards for different land use applications. That would be what's the most important part about administration. And examples of administration issues would include, we have some definitions in Title 17 that are either unclear or there's a little bit of conflict within the code about those. So one that the staff has brought up and we've talked about a little bit is gross floor area definition, what that means, how it really can be implemented. And then should you be requiring the judgment of the building official to make a call on a zoning issue that's really in your municipal code, not the building code. Another is you have a building height definition in your definition section, but then many of the base zones then elaborate on that base definition and add some more detail. So that would be an example of just try to get your definition in one place, make sure it says the same thing every time. We've found some potential inconsistencies between the CDO and ORS provisions. Some of those we'll want to take a look at. I think some of those also in conjunction with your city attorney. And then we have, and this one kind of overlaps a little bit with policy and administration, is matching the review process with the standards that you have for development. So for example, right now you require design review for most of your land use applications except for single family residences. And so a question there would be, would there be some other, could you broaden that so that maybe the staff would have the authority to review more applications, particularly if they're relatively simple and maybe don't warrant a more elaborate process. And then matching your review process with clear and objective criteria, typically for ministerial and administrative reviews, and then more subjective standards for reviews that either go to the design review board or the planning commission. Okay, next slide, please. And then finally, policy. And that's really what we're going to probably be talking about mostly for the rest of this evening. It's just how does a comprehensive plan work to really guide how the CDO is supposed to implement what you want. So you articulate what it is you want in the plan, and then the code, if it's done right, should be able to reach the ends or conclusion that you're talking about in the comprehensive plan. So we have some examples of policy issues. And of course, we're going to be talking about village character, small scale, and those sorts of things later this evening. What does that mean? And how can we better articulate what it is the city's after? Several, as I mentioned also a little bit before, several sections of the plan include what I would call regulatory language, and whether just really talk about whether or not that's really appropriate in the comprehensive plan, or whether that should be moved over to the code. And then there are a lot of policy statements that you have in the comprehensive plan that should be reviewed to see how those possibly should be updated or improved as we go along. So that's all I have. I'll turn it back to Marcy.
Thank you, Keith. Now we're going to talk about the Village Character Survey results. So first I'm going to show, if we could go to the next slide, and the next slide. This was a mosaic of photos that I took back in September. These are sites that I saw on my bike ride and sites that staff gave me addresses to look at. And I think we put these images in with the survey, but I want to clarify that these are not intended to be any sort of judgment about what represents good or true village character. They're really just to show it a wide variety of situations that we find in the residential districts of Cannon Beach. So I apologize if that was confusing. And I got some good photos from people. If we could go to the next slide, I included some of these good examples of good and bad village character. So people sent in their own examples. And up on the upper left is an example that it's not so good. I mean, in fact, it's bad, but so we set that off with a little white space just to make sure that it's not understood to be part of the more positive village character images that were sent. So if we could just go on to the next slide, I'll talk about the results of the survey. Thank you so much for everybody taking, all the people that did take that. It took, I think, 5 to 8 minutes for people to do it. And I've gotten some really important information from this group. We want to open the same survey out to the public, but as far as giving us information about what village character features or characteristics are valued and how people describe them. It's really important for us as we go into the code recommendations for the code audit as to how you would update your code provisions so they better support the picture that people have of village character and that you have policy about. Because as we're going to talk about a little bit later in my presentation, we have to regulate residential structures using clear and objective language. And there are Oregon revised statutes and things that for that reason for that. So we're going to have to come down to clear and objective standards for residential neighborhoods when it comes to village character. So you can see from that color chart that the factors that we asked people to rate were building size, building shape, architecture of the street facing walls or facade, landscaping between the street and the building, building materials and treatments, and then we gave people a space to write other, and if they valued that highly to number it. And we asked people to put 1 through 6 on here. And then the way that the votes came in for the 18 total responses that we received, the top rated items, the bars that stick out the most are building size, architecture, street facing facade, building materials and treatments. But you can see that all of the items got pretty high rating. The purple bar below is other categories. It's a variety of things, but the other 5 categories all robustly voted up. Nothing got just 1. Nothing got just 6. I want to talk about the other items for ranking that people told me were important. So we could go to the next slide. So several people filled out other. Many people said not applicable for the other category, but many people put in comment there. And I think these are important to look at individually because they represent some things that we may have missed in identifying the earlier questions. And I also think they resonate to me with what people have been saying to me. So one was compatibility, how the building blends in with other buildings in the area and the relationship with the neighborhood is something that deserved to be on the list and would get a high ranking from a few people. Walkability of a village and how buildings are oriented to the street and are inviting to pedestrians. That's an item that we didn't include in the list, but it is important and someone brought it up. the way the building fits into the natural environment rather than blocking, destroying, or detracting it. That's an issue that resonates with me from the interviews that I did. And also, we didn't put that issue specifically in, but that seems very important to Cannon Beach as a coastal city with its iconic landscape. The color of the structure is important to a number of people. And building materials, architectural facade, this was a comment that a couple of people made, or similar types of comments, that building materials, architectural facade, and building shape are so close to being the same thing that it was hard to vote on them separately. And then I think person who said it's the whole package kind of summed it up. We could go to the next slide. How would you rank these characteristics? Should they vary within different neighborhoods? And I think this is very interesting. So I parsed it out a bit. We had 11 people say no, it shouldn't vary the village characteristics should be everywhere. We had 5 say, yes, it should be different. I'll talk about that in a second. And then 2 said other and had very interesting kind of subtle responses. So 11 responses said no. The no's generally said that all neighborhoods should be villagey or should be have to comply with the village character. And if any distinction between neighborhoods is warranted, Highway 101 might be the dividing line. For the 6th that thought yes, this is what we heard. Yes, presidential streets in Televana might be treated differently. Downtown and Spruce Corridor might be treated differently. And specifically 3,000 square foot homes might be too big in the presidential streets. For the 2 who said other, that was all about how the new relates to existing. So it comes back to that compatibility issue. Someone suggested more architectural freedom might be, should be potentially granted in the commercial area. And an envelope that houses fit in might be something that we're striving for, but that not all houses architecturally or have to look alike. So those 3 comments I think are interesting to talk about more if we could get more information about that, because it helps, that level of detail is going to help us when it comes down to the identifying clear and objective criteria. So if we could go to the next slide. I took that image that we were sent, a bad example, it's upper right corner, and I sketched over it because I think it represents a few things that just wanted to, that themes that will come up repeatedly throughout this process. I traced over it, I reversed it to disguise it, but here we are talking about the specific example. So it's been revealed, and I then applied color to it to kind of emphasize a few things. So on the upper left, I was trying to understand how street facing facade and scale, how that is understood, can be understood. And you can see in this example, we have a very tall building with a kind of flat facade facing the street. And then on the next over, we have a very petite cottage, probably a mid-century version of a cottage. And then on the far right is a rather larger house, but it's got shaped roofs and it's not so massive along the street. So these are things that we're going to be trying to measure, those characteristics, because we'll have to have some clear and objective criteria for that, I think, in order to get closer to village character. Another thing I think to notice about this project for the street set of ensemble of buildings is that one of those was remodeled, I believe, and not, and maybe didn't have to comply with your architectural design standards because it was remodeled. So there might be some ways that we also want to change the way the current standards you have, how they apply. On the lower left is just an idea about that landscaping between the building and the street. And, you know, Cannon Beach is interesting because you don't have real streets that are paved. They don't have real edges, except when in some of the presidential areas or other areas where there's a fence that outlines the yard. Otherwise, the edge is very permeable and there's not a sidewalk and people walk down the middle of the street. And sometimes the edge of the street is formed by shrubs and trees. And sometimes it's formed by gravel. But I do think for that walkability issue, edge is important, and the landscaped area, and how big are driveways, and what are they made of, and how much of the street pavement kind of, just blends into a driveway is important. I think that for walkability and for if planting and the landscaped edge is a big part of the village character, I think it's important to pay attention to that in your regulations. So that's what the lower right image is about, is the amount of pavement that sometimes fills up these places. So now I'm gonna, if we could go to the next slide, please. Now I'm gonna just walk you through a couple of reality checks about specific things about your code that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I think they're interesting to look at in light of the Village Character Survey. So the first example, let's just go to the next slide if you don't mind, is about what state law allows for design review of residential structures. And I want to excerpt from the Oregon Revised Statutes, a little section here that says that local governments may not adopt and apply only clear and objective standards, et cetera, to the regulating the development of housing, including needed housing. And we're in a state of kind of national housing emergency shortage, and Cannon Beach is no different than other areas. In fact, it's probably exacerbated here by some other unique circumstances unique to Cannon Beach. So as an Oregon city, this is a rule that you have to comply with. So ideas about extending design review to housing should be very carefully considered. In the end, design review can be an alternative track, but it can't be the only track for approval of housing. And the state considers in this period all housing to be needed housing, not just single family housing. So I would like to kind of hold that thought in your mind when we come back to the discussion later. So the next reality check, if you could go to the next slide, is about the village scale of downtown commercial buildings. Now, we haven't talked about commercial buildings yet. We wanted to keep the survey simple for now, and let's focus just on residential village character. But I know that village character downtown is also hugely important to Cannon Beach. And the reality check that's good to have is about parking. So let's go through this. One parking space for every 400 square feet is required for new downtown buildings. And that obviously works against individual sites in the downtown, and they're contributing to the village character. We could go to the next slide. I'm pointing out two buildings here that you're all familiar with, that just as an example, if you can see the little lines and dots, they point to two buildings downtown that are about 3,800 to 4,000 square feet in area. And per that requirement for parking, if those buildings were replaced today, they would need to provide 10 parking spaces each. So obviously there's so many buildings in downtown Cannon Beach that can't meet that parking requirement. And some of the most iconic buildings that fully occupy the site and are multiple stories are probably, the worst at not meeting the structure, but they're the best at providing that Main Street character that you value in the village character. Lastly, as an illustration of this, if you could go to the next slide, just to show what happens when a building does come in and has to replace its parking on site. That middle is kind of a cartoon of a site plan. And we have on the left and right, two existing commercial buildings, which practically fill up their site. And then a new commercial building that's been a replacement has to provide 4 parking spaces, actually 5, because they're providing some employee parking here too. But you can see what that does to the streetscape and the downtown. That's the dilemma that we're in with the parking standard.
And I think I just want to emphasize, that's the dilemma we're in when we talk about village character. If you want to maintain village character, you're not even the zoning ordinance you have in place doesn't do that. It can't do that. It's not equipped to do it. It does that. And so, and then, the city says, the citizens say, why does the city allow that? Well, it's because the ordinance says that's all that's really allowed. And especially, you take off planned developments or anything other kind of more flexible, you're really stuck really with this. And you don't allow off-street parking variances or some type of new program to allow, as they did back, I think, when a lot of these were done, possibly have allowed some kind of put the parking someplace else off-site. And so, you look at the majority, and I'll do a little study here now that we've kind of going into this, of how much parking just currently in existing commercial area, how many parking spaces would need to be provided in the city area, it's just not possible. And so what do these new, someone with property, or it's converted, or they want to do something with that property, it's a dilemma right now. And really, that's why things are, I think you're not seeing a lot of new commercial development because people just don't see the benefit right now. And so it's just going to depreciate that value of those structures.
Jeff, I'd like to add, this is a good example because the real life example is the new pot shop. And I don't know, I must have had to recuse myself on that particular issue, but the design review board could have required that the building be brought forward to the street and not have 4 or 5 parking spaces in front. And I don't know exactly how we missed that beat, but it's a very bad example of planning, even when you do require parking. And my preference would have been let them buy into the city parking pool and be done with 4 dinky little parking spaces in a sea of asphalt. But the city, but my point is the DRB does have the authority to make decisions about location of the building on the site.
Yeah, and there is, like you said, Mike, there is. But if you could not honestly do that, I don't think, with this plan, because I think Jay and Dave tried to do that. Problem was, I think that you lose that one extra space, and so that it didn't work out if you move that forward, because you're gaining those 2 on that side, see, where you're going to be blocking that if you moved it forward. So they tried that. But anyhow, it is an example. There is some discretionary or subjective review as part of the DRB, but you can require or you can give alternatives, like you said, off-street parking areas and other things like that as an incentive. They first, when they tried to do the North Avenue or the North End pot shop, they first came and asked for an off-street parking variance and they were denied. So,
yes, Daryl
must not have been there.
This is, I think, an important issue to pick up later or in the very near future, because I think this is an important issue that all small downtowns struggle with. Basically, parking. You can decide to have people and commerce and activity and even mixed uses or parking. You can't really have both in a vital downtown. And parking management is a thing that a lot of cities are turning to try to manage the limited supply of parking, to manage the parking resource more and not require every single site to provide the parking as the code requires. Because you'll get the situation, if you had this situation, even just on every street, it would kind of ruin your downtown. If you had it on every block, every site or every other site, it would, as many cities have, unfortunately, had happened to them.
Well, a little historical perspective is in order here, because in Sam, you remember, in 88, I think the city said, okay, we're not going to require parking in the 2-block area of downtown. And there was this huge rush to develop up to the max. And the village center went up, the building next to your building went up. What else? The landing went up, all in this very short period of time. And everybody freaked out and said, oh, that's terrible. You know, we can't have all this development, you know, it's ruining our town. And they went back to requiring the parking 1 per 400. So, you know, I mean, that's a little object lesson, but then we expanded parking, public parking immensely. I mean, thanks to Sam saying, well, let's move the recycling center back, consolidate and provide another 150 parking spaces. But everybody still, for some reason, decided that we still needed to have parking spaces for the downtown.
But one part of that is what you're talking about is part of management, because in '88, when the funding came in to pay for your parking space that you didn't need to build on, built the city parking lot behind on Spruce. So that paid for that. So in that sense, there was a good bad because it made the big blocky buildings, but it also gave us the big parking lot.
Well, the 1 per 400 square feet that it's at currently, I went back because of the Warren Pub. I was reviewing something for that. And back when that passed, it was 1 per 100 square feet. That's why there's so much parking at that Warren Pub one. So, I mean, it's I think bad right now at 1 by 400, but 1 by 100. I mean, it's like, if you have this much space here, you got to have a car. It's the car is bigger than the actual space you're using inside. So, no, it's.
Well, thanks for the history and the background of that. Hopefully we can start this conversation up after this point. But let me go over one more reality check. Aren't these fun? There's just one more though. So I wanted, this is relevant to the discussion that we're going to have as a group. Right now you have architectural design elements in your code. I'm sure you're all familiar with this provision. It allows just 2 of those items there: dormers, more than 2 gables, recessed entries, covered porch entry, a bay window, building offset, a deck with railing or planters and benches, a garage, carport, or other accessory structure. I question whether that last one is equivalent to the others, but in any case, you only require 2 of those, and most cars have a garage anyway. Also, this doesn't apply to remodels. So this is just an example of kind of where the code itself may not be working as well, and this is an opportunity to talk about exactly how to fix it. So the next part of our gathering here is going to be breaking into small groups to discuss a few specific questions. I'll just let you know what the questions are, and then we'll break into groups. Just thinking about this, your facilitator will help you with the question. And so for review, then they'll go over them. But in 10 years' time, what would you want to make sure remains a part of the village? That's question number 1, and there are 3. In 10 years' time, what currently doesn't exist that you would like to see in the village? And lastly, discuss the tools you currently have for architectural controls.
What's that? I'm not doing it. Okay, well, if we're sitting around, you can just talk about it.
And this is the example.
Thank you.
And your facilitator is going to ask you, if possible, to kind of reach agreement if you're not able to report back either the agreement that you reached or the differences that you had. And we'll come back in the end, and there will be 4 groups that report back. So it'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to break into groups of all Joint Commission members present. Come with me, or wait, who is that?
The joint will sit here, and then we're going to go into the other and run the remote with.
So all you in-person people are with me. All
You're
the,
pumping.
sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
And then Keith will run the joint work session, those that are on the Zoom call.
In a separate Zoom meeting.
And Keith will be sending out that link because you'll have to log into a new account for that meeting.
Is that any questions?
No, just about your survey.
Yes.
I did a lot of that surveying when I was in college. I ran a survey group for our university, but I honestly felt that your survey was a little biased with the pictures, and I'm hoping when you put that out in the future that you don't include those.
Okay.
There was another question I had though. Sam, I thought we were going to talk about the comprehensive plan, and I guess we're going to house size as a big, or village character, I guess, is a big part of the comprehensive plan, but I have no idea what is our comprehensive plan after looking online. And I'd like some clarity on that.
Oh.
We've got 4 documents on there. One of them is called comprehensive plan. The other 3 look like reports or maps or whatever. And I'd like to get clarity on how those.
Yeah. So there's supporting materials. There's the comprehensive plan, like you said, then there's supporting materials that are part of the, usually when they update a certain report or element, whether it's a 4D management plan or something like that, that's usually adopted in Oregon as a supporting material to the comprehensive plan. Often maybe replace an old 4D management plan or something like that. And then there's maps, like you said, there's a certain land use, zoning, different, the ocean shoreline, things like that. They're all done as maps. Those also need to usually be updated. And as you can tell, if you pulled up those maps, I don't think a lot of those have been updated in at least 34 years.
No, but those attachments, are they operative? Do they guide your judgment?
Yes, they're supposed to be part of the.
And how do they? Because they were basically just as I understood them, a description of what the city was at that, a picture.
Snapshot at that time. Yeah. And so that's what often, cities of our size, my understanding in the state of Oregon, when the original land use code went through, we had to do a comprehensive plan. Every city in the state did. And at the time when they passed it, they, as in other states, they thought that it would be periodically updated. Oregon, Idaho, it's every 10 years. Georgia, it's every 10 years you have to do it. In Georgia, you have to have a 3-year capital improvement plan is attached to it. But that was, I think, the medium and large size cities still have to do periodic reviews. And so they do have to do it on a time thing, but nothing in the state's code that I'm aware of requires a smaller city to ever update their comprehensive plans once they've done it.
But the policy document, the actual comprehensive plan has the force of law, because they are policies, thou shalt do such and such.
Right. And that's what I was trying to get at. Mark, right?
Mike.
The other documents do what?
They're supportive, they're background documents. They're supportive.
Jeff relies upon them, so he relies upon them now, because I read through a lot of it and I couldn't tell how anybody, a planner, could use any of that information to make a decision. And so part of the comprehensive plan review should be to decide what our comprehensive plan is and not have these associated reports that nobody reads except you guys.
Yeah, and I think that is part of what they identify in the code audit. What's, what needs updating or what's.
I think also what Keith was talking about in his opening part is how to restructure all this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be working towards, is when we get to those parts that don't seem to fit, the restructuring will help us figure out where they fit and how to update them. So at the moment, we're nibbling at the problems.
I get it, yeah.
So let's break up and proceed with your plan here.
Okay, so you all stay here.
Okay, this is Keith. I have one question. I think I heard Jeff say that I was going to send the Zoom link, and I have the Zoom link for myself, but I don't know how to reach these other folks.
Yeah, so you're going to send them, or we can send them as
I'm
well.
gonna send it.
Yeah. So
Please, if you
we'll,
could, I don't have their emails.
yeah, so Keith, through this, we'll send everyone that's on the panel right now. We're sending them through the chat, and then they will log in once you've started up that meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Yeah, so
We have 2 online.
okay, so Robert's gonna manage.
So I'm sorry, do we close out of our computer?
yes, and so you guys, once you get that new information,
I just sent it over the chat.
Oh, you sent it
they
through
Should be able to
chat?
see it.
yeah, so they can join the new meeting through that link.
Confused,
They
yeah.
have to close out of what,
But if we
before.
close out, we can't see the chat.
So can you guys copy that and,
No,
or do you want me to send it to you in an email?
yes.
All right, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. So you want us to leave the meeting right now?
Yeah, and Jeff, if you could include me too, it looks like the link I got looks different from what's in the chat, so.
Okay, I'll send it to everyone, Mickey. Okay,
He's gonna have to log into that other account.
yeah, right. I'll let him know.
So we
I will
should,
do my best to log in, folks, on Zoom, but I may lose service here pretty soon.
All right, thanks.
so we leave the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So if Eric wants to speak, he certainly can.
Yeah, hi Eric, my name is Robert St. Clair, I'm the city planner for City Cannon Beach. And sorry about the interruption. If you would like, we can certainly include you in the discussion we're having this evening about, about the what you'd like to see in 10 years' time. We were expecting a few more members of the public. Right now, you're the only one who's here. But yeah, definitely. If you would like to give us some feedback, we'd certainly want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you guys do what you need to do and hop in if I have any comments.
Oh, well, I would just ask, we just have a couple questions. The first one would be, in 10 years' time, what would you want? In 10 years' time, what would you want to make sure remains a part of the village?
Yeah, so part of what draws me to Cannon Beach, and I've been, I live in Portland, but I've been going there my whole life, and we actually purchased some land there recently and are looking to build a house. And so this is really interesting discussion for myself. And what draws us to Cannon Beach is that village feel, kind of the, I've been watching the meeting and we're kind of trying to figure out how to describe that. And I think that part of what it is the size that people are pinpointing, but also just that, it's not commercial, kind of like Seaside. So when I compare Cannon Beach to Seaside, I think of Seaside as having McDonald's and Chevron and these kind of bigger, larger brand names, while Cannon Beach is more homey and mom and pop shops, and you get this aesthetic that's, I think of Cannon Beach and Leavenworth and similar cities like that just, it's hard to describe, but they have that appeal that everything's kind of walking distance, and You know, that I think that's pretty much what I've got.
Okay. So when you said Leavenworth, I'm assuming you're talking about Leavenworth, Washington, that little Bavarian village?
Yes, correct.
So how would you, and this is just, kind of an off the cuff question, but how would you compare Cannon Beach to something like Leavenworth?
I would say they're very similar. So I mean, you've got the shingle siding, you've got the aesthetic that's just true to the town itself. So Cannon Beach is a beach town. It's smaller sized. Leavenworth is a smaller sized Bavarian town. They're kind of similar in that aspect.
Okay. So in 10 years' time, what currently doesn't exist that you would like to see in Cannon Beach?
I'm not, I haven't thought about that. Not entirely sure that there is anything that I can think of, but let me think about it and come back if I think of something by the end.
And at some point in the future, we're going to be having some more public outreach. So the primary purpose of the survey that you saw discussed earlier today is we were initially targeting the city council and the planning commission to get feedback from them due to their kind of special roles in the community. And then the next step is going to be effectively taking that same survey and expanding that out to the public to get more commentary.
Okay, great.
So there will definitely be an opportunity in the future. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot else to get into because we were expecting to have about an hour of discussion, and I was expecting probably about a dozen people. So I'm not 100% sure what to do right now. I mean, we could pass you over and you could just watch the discussion happening in the other room if that's something you'd like to do. But I don't really think we have anything else as far as questions to really go into right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know that one important aspect of reviewing this code and keeping the village aesthetic is, and what has drawn me to these conversations is the proposed limiting of the house sizes to 2,000 square feet. So we have plans already drawn up for our house, and I think they're coming in at like 2,083 or something.
Okay.
And so that's definitely an important part that I am interested in, because I mean we're barely fitting into the FAR ratio as it is right now, and I've worked with the design company as much as possible, and seems like it's hard to really limit it any more than that and be able to stay there and eventually relocate to Cannon Beach with a house much smaller than that. So that's just a comment that I wanted to put out there. Obviously, something that we're paying attention to.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for public commentary and engagement as we get farther into this process.
Okay, great.
So it looks like Janae's on.
Sure. Hi, Janae. Hold on. What's moving?
No, Janae, if you want to speak, I need you to acknowledge. If not, that's okay. If you just want to listen. Okay. All right, well, what else would you like to do?
I don't know, like I said, I was expecting a little bit bigger of a public turnout.
Well, what we can do.
There were some people watching on the YouTube stream that maybe weren't part of the Zoom stream.
Yeah, that's only a listen only.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we'll do is I'll switch.
I guess just switch over. Hi, Derek. Well, thank you for your commentary.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll send you back as an attendee.
I guess switch over to.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back in the other room to do that.
That's fine.
So.
The commercial zones in any of the areas, and that's a policy statement that has been in effect for 40 years.
Good. It's a good one.
So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Barb?
Oh, wait, I have one. Apart from house size and inventory of older homes, historical homes, by the way, we are tearing down trees at a historical rate right now. It needs to stop.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Yes.
So I would like the growth of the homes to stop. I would like to preserve what we have that are valuable in the neighborhoods. I think we need to strengthen our tree ordinance so that we aren't losing as many trees as we are currently. I think a really good move that we have already made is to not let lots be combined. And I think that's gonna help preserve what we have.
So just so I think I know what you mean when you say I'd like to see the growth of homes stop. You don't mean the number, but you mean the size?
The size, yes.
Thank you. Brandon.
What are the next two questions?
In 10 years, what currently does not exist that you would like to see in the village? And then the last one was, when you think about that architectural provision that we had up, and you think about village character, how protective do you think that provision is?
Okay, great. I'll save the comments I was going to make now for those questions.
Okay.
I agree with Barb about size somewhat. I didn't answer the survey quite like everybody else did, or the majority of people. The size of structures is not as important to me as how they fit on a lot and look architecturally. But I just like to maintain the village character that this town has had in the past, and I feel currently does.
With some exceptions.
There are always exceptions, and I think my views will run counter to what most people have in the room, so I don't want to cause too much disturbance.
Councillor Risley, did you finish your answer?
About the height of the.
Yeah, that was the one thing that you said.
That was the one thing, but I also agree with Mike and Barb about trees and the preservation. I mean, we have rules, but they're not being enforced, and we need to enforce them. It's pretty pathetic right now. So that's a concern.
So can we go to the second question?
Sure. Can I mention, I just want to ask something about trees. I'm a tree hugger. I'm protecting 12 acres of old growth forest, or what passes for old growth in town. But I mean, how do you prevent somebody that wants to build a house from taking down, a reasonably sized house that's covered with trees that are this size from cutting the trees. And that's, I saw the tree numbers, the inventory that somebody did. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot of trees, but most of the lots that are still available are heavily treed. And you can't tell somebody that they can't build their house in order to save trees.
Yes.
You can mess around with placement, but you can't say to this nice couple down the street from me in Haystack Heights that are right in the middle of the lot, it's a 2,500 square foot house, that they can't take out a dozen large spruce trees.
There was a philosophy at one time where we would work around trees and we would try and enhance the property with a tree on it.
Sure.
And I think that has totally gone away. It's like clear the lot for a pickleball court. Have you heard about the one on Maher where there are no trees? And I think that we used to rely on softscape and a lot of other things to work with green. And right now it's a free for all to get rid of everything.
Well,
There's also the option, Mike, to allow people to cut trees, but ask them to replace it somewhere in the city, either on the property or somebody somewhere else. They want to cut that tree that sits in the middle of their 2,500 square foot house. By all means, it'll cost you a little bit. Factor it into your building costs or your home costs, but that's fair enough. It's done in a lot of cities around this.
In the context of that question, then that would be to keep the tree canopy, but not necessarily every tree in place. Is that, could we say
The
that?
default should be the tree stays. People can tear them down for their house, but they got to put another one up. They got to plant one.
Well, I think that's already the requirement.
Citywide
It's
canopy.
not being done.
It's definitely not being checked, that's for sure.
And by the way, the last meeting I attended, I was told that's not the rule. So.
Should be.
Well, Robert can answer that.
So the existing ordinance requires that if you are, for example, removing all trees from a 5,000 square foot lot, such as the one that was mentioned up here at the corner of Hemlock and I believe Van Buren, that there would be a requirement to replace 4 trees. That requirement is in place. And when that house is constructed and before a certificate of occupancy is issued, the placement of those trees will be confirmed by city staff.
On the lot itself?
Correct.
Robert, is that the house that's going to be a dual house?
It's going to be a house with an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit.
That's a second structure on it.
It's a detached garage, and then the accessory dwelling unit will be upstairs from that garage.
So do you give a set of trees that can be replaced there? Because I was told that one person was told they could just put a lilac bush where the tree was.
No, that is not correct. There is a specific list of trees that are approved for planting.
Well, in this particular case, that was the response given to them.
That response would not be based on the code.
Correct.
Nor would have been approved. They planted it.
And the size of the trees, is there a restriction or a requirement for a certain size of tree that's planted?
I would have to.
There is, it's got to be in a 5-gallon pot and about 6 to 8 feet high. And it has a grade, I think there's a grade requirement. It's got to be approved by the state.
Well, it's a 1.5 inch caliper for deciduous or 6 to 8 feet for conifer. But, I object to people saying that it's not being, that, it's kind of beating up on staff, because I do see those requirements being enforced around town,
There's a feeling that probably then the requirement should be stronger.
Well, perhaps, but, here's the Moons, for example, up on 101 they want to build their house. And because it's so heavily treed, they've got to build a driveway in off the highway. They've got to clear the lot. There's probably, 2 log trucks worth of logs that were taken out of that. And I don't know how you can avoid that. And if somebody wants to build, build a house.
It's simple. You just say if you can cut them down, you just have to replace them.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
And that's why we are working on a modified tree ordinance.
Yeah.
So it's in the process to start answering those questions, both issues of how to replace and how to allow for a proper development to occur. I think we need to be equally as stringent on public property as we are on private property, and take care of that. I think that would be a better concern, and allow, like Mike was saying, is if you enforce the fact that you increase the ones that you plant, but you can replant them elsewhere, that we as a city designate as a grove or something like that. I don't know. But again, we are working on that. So why don't we proceed with our question from tonight?
Our second.
Back on track.
Okay.
Yes, second question.
So do you want me to restate the second question?
Please.
In 10 years' time, what currently doesn't exist that you would like to see in the village?
This was hard.
More trees.
And maybe,
So how about if we put you last on the answer queue this time, and we go backwards? Are you ready to answer this, Councilor?
well, I was hoping that maybe there could be some sort of designation for older homes. Now, I think the closest we have to that is when the History Center has their tour, people can get a little plaque that they put on their house that they've been on. But there isn't any sort of historic designation that might encourage people to actually maintain the house the way it is, like they do in Oregon State with Oregon State Parks or a national registry. So I'm hoping that maybe that would give a little more pride to a house, and there are rules that you can't renovate the house in certain ways to continue to have your tax break. And anyway.
How old do those houses have to be though? To even be on the registry?
50 years.
50, okay.
So mid-century modern is now historic.
Yeah.
Right.
Shag rugs.
Avocado.
Yeah.
Appliances.
Avocado and orange.
Orange shag rug.
I guess I would like to see some type of provision made in the code to give some incentive besides accessory dwelling units to further affordable housing in this community.
For other forms of housing?
Yeah, and I've brought up in the past, and it wasn't agreed upon by the council to try and give some type of density bonus for somebody to, put that into code form to allow for like less planting, less parking, that sort of thing. But it's something, if I had a wish list, that'd be on it.
And I agree, affordable housing, workforce housing is something we have to talk about and plan for. And more trees.
Tree houses.
Tree houses.
There you go.
I don't know, it's probably been done. Inventory of wetland, but it seems like we've got a lot of green spaces around this place that are disappearing. And we might take an inventory and see which one of those that the city can afford to take over and develop into recreational and educational opportunities.
Great,
That's it.
thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I think affordable housing. I think Haystack Heights is a good example. It's an R1 zone. And you can't build a duplex in an R1 zone. You can have an ADU on the lots, but you can't build like in President Streets, you can have a duplex on 5,000 square feet. And I think Haystack Heights is an outlier that needs to be amended. Yeah, affordable housing, I think, land banking, that was one of the ideas of buying the 53 acres, the South Wind, that it would become affordable housing possibility. But just finding the land at a reasonable price is extremely daunting. In the next 10 years, it's only going to get worse. So, I don't know. Other than ADUs, I don't know how you're going to do it. I mean, the Planning Commission turned down Mike Clark's proposal to put an affordable housing or a housing project downtown behind Ecola Square, and I thought that was a terrible mistake. We would have had another 20 units or something of rental housing. But I think providing variance criteria that would allow for affordable housing, and affordable doesn't mean low income anymore. Affordable can be 1,800 square or 1,800 bucks a month. If a couple has a decent income, two people working or two roommates, I mean, the idea that, it has to be under 600 bucks a month or something is so far gone. That horse is really, unless it's Shorewood or Elk Creek Terrace, which is subsidized by the federal government. So I think we've got to look at being much more flexible in allowing apartment construction. So.
Can I just ask where do you picture that as a goal? Where would that be allowed?
Where would what be allowed?
More affordable or workforce or attainable housing and.
Like I said, Southwind is an example. I mean, Southwind, we bought with that thought in mind. I don't know what other land is going to be available. It's probably going to be on the east side of the highway where, it's covered with spruce trees. And then you've got issues there. But, I don't think when a lot in my neighborhood goes for $250,000, just a bare lot for a single family house, it's not going to be easy to build rental housing, period.
Isn't that kind of part of the discussion we should be having though? Is like, what is the city going to look like? I mean, we're assuming, I agree, affordable housing is important, but I don't know how important it is. I don't know if you need to have 1,000 units out there or 50 or 20. You talked about this place up here, Elk Creek. It's now been condominiumized, hasn't it?
No, it's the one just past the substation up on the hill above the public works yard. That's Elk Creek Terrace.
Oh, okay, up under the ride. Okay.
Yeah.
And that housing or that apartment or that condominium complex on the left?
That was supposed to be rentals, but they turned it into a condo complex. But Shorewood back here is a low and moderate income housing project. 30.
But how many? I mean, I looked at, that's why I asked about the reports. I looked at these reports in 10-year increments and it's like population has gone down. Number of second homeowners has gone up. What are we anticipating we need in 10 years? I don't see anything changing. This is a tourist town. This is a highly expensive town to live in. Who are we trying to draw with affordable housing? You guys can help me. I don't know.
Can't even provide housing for top level professionals that work for the city.
Okay.
I mean, if you don't call it affordable housing and you just call it workforce housing, we do not meet that minimum.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in here, and we're not going to solve this problem tonight. We are trying to answer some questions so that we can get into the details. So let's finish the room here and go
So
on.
I just wanted to clarify what the planning commission did with Mike Clark's apartment building when that burned down and they replaced it. We allowed them to build more apartments there with fewer parking spots. So there was some flexibility with that.
I was talking about the one behind Nicola Square. Remember, he walked away from that.
I'm thinking about the one behind the theater.
Behind the theater, yeah.
Yeah.
Skylark.
Yeah.
Did you have a 10-year thing?
Yeah. So I think we should have a swimming pool in town.
Getting tired of going to
We do.
A standard.
We do have one.
I know we
We
do,
just
but
have to take your
not a
RV in there.
Yeah, but you can't use it.
Take your RV in.
I'll throw out an affordable housing option that has been talked about. Get rid of the RV park and turn it into affordable housing. The council made a run at it with the tiny houses on wheels and got poleaxed by the state. But, I think that should be a goal. Convert the RV park, which we don't really need the money. I mean, it's insignificant. It's not a big cash cow anymore. It would be a much more valuable as a place to have affordable housing. And I mean, you look on the west side of Elkland Drive, and those are all affordable housing, manufactured homes. People live there permanently. They've built them over the years, and the same thing could happen in the RV park. So I say sell the RV park.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I brought that up over a year ago that they should convert some of those spaces to small housing units. So
We could get really deep into all of this. Trying to get around the room, get our questions answered so that we have time to get deep into all of this. So come on, let's keep going.
My turn now.
It's your turn.
I'd like to see some solution reached in terms of parking in this area. I mean, how many times a day do we hear about parking issues? I don't think we're going to solve the problem completely, but I sure would like to see us head towards some kind of resolution on that.
Yeah.
What, can you just define what resolution would be?
That's what we have to determine.
Okay.
I mean,
Managed parking.
there's various alternatives that people have discussed, but nobody's come to any agreement. And I would like to see more trees. Why not? And affordable housing. I agree with all of that.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to eliminate construction in wetlands. Just period. These vacant lots, many of them are vacant because they were in wetlands. Now people are coming in and I do not know how you can build and fill on wetlands. I've looked at the regulations and I know it's being violated left and right.
Yeah.
Should just eliminate it. That would keep more trees, it'd keep more open green space, it would provide more habitat. And so I guess the other thing I have is kind of to Nancy's concern. One of the resolution or solutions could be for parking is to, in 10 years, have truly a remote parking system set up with shuttles from a more distant location. Maybe we'll get through this in the code somewhere, but I think tear downs need to have criteria that has to be met in order to justify tearing down a house.
Did you have others?
I've got a whole bunch, but
That's enough for now.
well, the whole second home thing. A lot of this comes back to the fact that people build houses and leave them vacant. You get into that and it's just a can of worms, but some way to get control of these short-term rentals, second homes, and I don't have a solution for it, but it is truly changes the character of our town. It is not a village. It's filled with commercial properties renting out to the tourists. There's nothing village-like about that. You need to have people living in all these houses. And I guess one way to do it is you can't have anything but long-term rentals. I'd also like to see a more pedestrian-friendly downtown, such as a pedestrian mall.
So streets that don't have cars on them.
Okay. Oh, I'm not done.
Sounds like it.
No, I was letting her right. I like the trail system we've started. I'd like to see in 10 years from now, we truly have a walkable city without having to risk your life walking along a very narrow, busy street. Whether it's expand the pathways, trails, bike routes.
Is that it?
For now.
Okay.
I think mine's more an aesthetic, because I want in 10 years what we don't have, and we might have, but I don't feel like we do. But when somebody comes to town, buys a piece of property, wants to build, they come with an attitude that I want to be here. I want to build what is here, not bring in some outside culture. I'm talking about like what we always call bringing in Beaverton or something like that, so that you want to adapt to the community that you're moving to. And I think that's kind of a conglomeration of what everybody's been saying, put into a sensibility of when somebody sees what we accomplish when we're done with this problem. Okay, and your
So
last
we've gone
question.
all around, yeah. This is really helpful.
What's the last question again?
So we were thinking really big, and now we're thinking kind of small, and we're talking specifically about the provision that says architectural family dwellings, modular housing, and manufactured homes located in these zones shall utilize at least 2 of the following architectural features, and then there's a list of them. And I don't know, can we pull up that image that Jeff has prepared, the features on it?
As I recall, and I'm just spitballing here, is that was put in lieu of doing design review for residents.
Right.
That was quite a discussion at that time of creating the design review program, was whether we should do residents or not. And I think this was kind of put in as a helpful guide to designers to at least design.
I have to offer some additional background to this. In the presentation, I went through the slide about Oregon revised statute rules that say needed housing has to be given a clear and objective track. You can have an additional design review track available, but you must offer clear and objective. So I believe that this was not it was probably to meet that rule. And I know that this kind of regulation can be written quite well. I know clear and objective standards can be written well. So the question kind of for you right now is this sufficient? Is this working for you? Or do you, given what you considered to answer the survey and all the features or images that you conjured in order to answer the survey about village character, are there ways you think this could be improved? Could it be applied? For example, I mentioned it's not, I don't believe it is applied to remodels. Should it be? Are these the right features? Should it be covering? So anyway, just maybe we could go around the room and talk about that, and keeping in mind that we do have to reach some agreement about what is clear and objective for if this is just architectural design elements, there might be others. There might be planting, a landscaping palette that's clear and objective. There might be a streetscape palette that's clear and objective, but let's just take the architectural design component by itself and consider what you have currently on the books.
Is that clear and objective?
Yes.
But it's not effective.
But it does allow.
You have to have two of those things and someone can check it off.
Okay.
It could be more, you could add to that. I mean, it could be more specific. Gables that, or, that so much of the facade must be treated in this way. And you could actually give that a measurement there. This is a little vague. Someone only has to check off, okay, you've got two gables and a carport. Check, you're done.
And it still turns out to be a big ugly box.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
the trouble with
effective.
this does not provide that we don't continue to setback to setback with a big ugly box.
And a dormer and a gable.
Yeah, and dormer.
A big ugly box with a dormer.
I'm on a question about the state, what you were calling the state ordinance thing. That requires that we provide for housing. That we can do the design review, but we also have to have a separate avenue for a house to be built. Does that house have to be defined as, say, size? I mean, I guess what I'm getting to is kind of the comment is if it stays at a certain size or less, there's no design review. If it goes above that size, there is design review. Still allows for housing.
I don't know if you can distinguish between houses by size and say above this size, houses go through design review. I'm not sure, but I have heard this sentiment, stated as something that people are interested in. We can look into it.
Or locational
I don't believe.
on certain streets or on the ocean front.
No, I don't believe so. The goal of the state rule is to make sure that housing, especially, this is applying especially to the so-called middle housing that other larger cities in Oregon are all changing their zoning codes to comply with. They're allowing duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters. They're required to allow those in all single dwellings, and they cannot discriminate against that type of housing any more than they do single dwellings. They have to rewrite their zoning rules so that all dwellings are treated the same. And so what this means in some cities is that they're applying very high level of clear and objective standards to all housing, including single family housing, where they never did before. Single family housing could be built without any review at all, but now has to meet these stringent standards, but so does all the other middle housing. That's how some cities are doing it. Other cities are just being a little bit more laissez-faire about it and saying that all middle housing is treated in the same kind of laissez-faire way that single family. So there's a range of approaches, but the point is that you have to treat all housing the same way. You can't accept certain housing and require it only to go through design review.
The DRB has been talking about prescriptive standards, many more prescriptive standards than what we have now. And I think that's something we need to get on top of, so that things like the Purple House and others that will remain unnamed, are reviewed or discouraged, I should say. But prescriptive standards would say, pitched roof, things that are up there need to be required. Maybe pitched roofs, maybe garages can't be snout houses. Garages have to be set back 20 feet from the facade of the house. Every house has to have a porch, on and on and on. And, Jeff's on top of that. I mean, I think Jeff and Robert can come up with some criteria that the design review board could use. But I mean, the state standards really don't give us any, they don't recognize the fact that 70% of our housing is vacation housing, and most of the new construction is not permanent housing, but, vacation homes, especially on their, 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 square feet. So I would think that there's some kind of latitude there.
You're saying, Mike, it should be strengthened, right? That's what I understood.
Yeah.
Something occurred to me as you talk about a size limit and so forth. And I refer to the Big Ugly Box. There are a lot of one-story houses that are essentially box, and somehow they don't seem ugly.
Because they're smaller.
They're small. They've got a pitched roof and a dormer or two, a covered front porch, and they're a box, but they don't just leap out at you like a two-story, or some are even higher, that are truly boxes. So I think size has some place in this discussion. I'm just not sure exactly how to make that clear and understood, whatever it was.
Well, the other thing that I've noticed with some of the new housing is there was a formula where you could just build so much space and the rest of the space around there would be a yard. But I'm seeing these new houses being built, and what's being placed around that is hard surface, gravel, hard surface plates, a potted plant. That's kind of what you're getting down to, which certainly changes the character of the neighborhood. Certainly makes it less village-like.
That's that 50% rule, 50%
Yeah,
of
but
your
it's not
landscape.
being enforced. It's not being enforced.
I think we're at you, Nancy.
What's that?
Did you finish your comment?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just listening to the discussion right now. I don't have a real opinion about this at the moment.
I already interjected my thoughts.
You.
I didn't wait.
Mike.
I'm still kind of curious about the state rule. I'd love to hear some more depth on that and when it was put in place compared to when our rules were put in place, that kind of stuff. Because we can't compare ourselves to the majority of other cities. There's a few cities along the coast that have a similar problem that we have. Most of them are trying their damnedest to grow. We really don't want to do that. We really keep our geological restrictions. So in every discussion I've had at conferences and something like that, everybody wants to build more and more and bigger and increase their tax base and all that kind of stuff. And I'm saying, I can't relate because Cannon Beach is so different. We're pretty limited to what we have and what we're able to do. And in that sense, we are also desiring a way to limit what the appearance of things are that are in our community. So that's getting harder and harder as property values go higher and higher, and you're getting a different clientele coming in and building more and more. And that seems to have just skyrocketed in the last few years. So I think it skyrocketed because of previous years, we didn't have the building that was keeping up to the rest of the world. So I don't know, that's just, again, comparisons that I don't think are really pertinent to us. I think we need to come up with our guidance. If we are guided then by the state saying we have to do something that means that all housing has to be fair, okay. I'd tie it all down even tighter.
But you want to do it in your own way.
Yeah, and it would be fair because it's all the same. But, you know, I don't know if that fits what the state is thinking. So I guess that's where I'm at in the sense of what one other little topic. When we get too prescriptive or when we get that clear objectives, you can also put yourself into a cookie cutter situation. So everybody has the same dormer and everybody has the same garage setback. That becomes just as much of a problem as the occasional big box. We want creativity. We want people to be unique in what they're building. We've got that. And we've had that ever since Cannon Beach's inception. Good example is we go back up to Forest Lawn Road. All those homes, that was kind of the posh street at one time. All those front homes up there. There were some really nice things and now they're being torn down and built bigger. But again, there was variety in what you saw. There's still kind of a variety there, but it's for some reason it's obnoxious now. And I don't know why.
Even more so.
Pardon?
One builder.
One builder, yeah. Well, there was one builder a long time ago too. I mean, there was one guy who built fireplaces around here forever.
Nico's.
And so.
Lagerquist.
Oh,
yeah.
Lagerquist, yeah.
So I take.
How many dormers does your gallery in your house have, Sam?
Dormers?
God, wait, don't answer that. We have to get around to it.
I'll have to think about it. Go ahead. Robin?
I really don't have anything more to add.
I'm all pass.
I'm gonna just follow right along. I don't know enough about architectural design. I need to be educated.
I agree with Sam. That's just a safe thing to do right here. I don't have any input on architectural design either. I just don't. It's one of those things I know when I see it, or don't see it, but I can't input on this. I think you need to guide us on what the options are here, those five, that list of 6 things, probably not enough. I think is what you're saying.
I would say so. Okay, great. So we're done in this group with the 3 questions and I'm closing so that we can hear what the other group had to say and we can share what we said. Do you want to start that process?
No, I'll let Keith.
Yes. Keith, do you want to go first with your group?
Sure. I'll relay my notes and I am probably have left something out, but I'll let them chime in if I miss something. So we had the 3 basic questions. One, in 10 years' time, what would you like to make sure remains as part of the village? Number 2, in 10 years' time, what doesn't exist you would like to see? And number 3, discuss the tools you currently that you have or would like to have for architectural controls. So one is this one is to close the existing access to Ecola Park and have a new access. That was a number 2 suggestion. Obviously, a lot of that access is outside of the city, but the city is affected. The next is for number one, no chain types of commercial establishments. Continue number one. Oh, yeah, to continue not having chains is number one. Another number one is to retain the gravel streets that we have. Kind of a combination of 1 and 2. To retain the pedestrian orientation that we have and improve it, possibly with some more trail connections and so forth. Number 1, retain more trees. And then that there's a little too much discretion on the city side for what gets removed and what stays. Number 3, related to that, would be to have an improved tree ordinance. Number 3, clear and objective criteria for land use applications. That would really help the decision makers in reviewing land use applications. Number 2, more affordable housing. And then 1 and 2, support for the arts, including housing. And then there was some discussion about maybe even having affordable housing as a way to support the art community and maintain the art community in Cannon Beach. Number 3, ADU or accessory dwelling unit incentives for long-term renters. No more oversized houses, number 1. Number 1, height limit along the ocean front. Number 3, parking in the downtown to remove the parking requirements, or at least greatly reduce the parking requirements for the downtown area. Number 3, reduce parking also for affordable housing. If that could be linked, that would be a good idea as well. And I think that's all I have, but I bet I left something off. So the rest of the group, what else did I leave out that we should mention?
I think before you joined the call, someone had said they wanted to retain historic cottages.
Okay.
I think Clay is speaking. Is that right?
Yeah.
He's muted.
Oh,
Lisa's.
And Lisa.
Expand the forest reserve was another.
Expand the forest reserve. And underground utilities was another one on number 2.
Oh, George would be so happy.
Were there any other additions?
Did we get the more trails in there for bikes and people?
Yeah.
Yeah, more
walkability.
Good.
Tie building to tightening up FAR, yeah. We said create incentives and tying ADUs to long-term rentals through deeds, etc.
Right.
And there was a lot of discussion about the FAR and lot coverage and limiting size.
Right. Tightening up those or making those ordinances for lot coverage and FAR and building envelopes, make them, work together to achieve what we want to do.
Okay, thanks, group number 1.
And they could have continued the rest of the night, I'll tell you that. They were ready to go.
We're nowhere near done.
They were just getting started.
Yeah, I think this is really great that we're doing this. All right, so I'm just going to read kind of from my notes. And first we went through around question number 1, which was the one about what do you want to make sure remains part of the village in 10 years. Maintain the green boundary. Keep the heights small. That is a feature that makes Cannon Beach feel the way that it does. Tree removal is a concern for lots of people. There's perception that it's not being it's not being done or it's not being done right and it's not being enforced. No or minimum curbs or sidewalks, the gravel roads, formal beach access, modest homes, no McMansions. Small scale is good, but it depends on where you are. Certain places, Haystack Heights, and there's a dilemma of wanting to have larger homes to attract families. Downtown as a commercial area, primarily a shingled architecture. Older inventory of homes preserved. House size and tree preservation is important. The growth of homes to stop homes from growing in size. Stop losing trees. Well, some of the village character we've had in the past, but there are some, there are some difference here in this group about that. I gather more can be pulled out of that comment in other conversations, but that it's not all about replicating the past, I think. Replacement of trees is important if trees have to be removed. Concern about trees being lost and enforcement. The designation for older home. Okay, so we're on question number 2 now. This is one was about in 10 years' time, what would you like to have that we don't have now? Designation for older homes that would encourage the people who own them to keep them the way they are with rules for renovation and tax in order to retain a tax break. Incentives besides ADU for affordable housing, for workforce housing. Inventory of the wetlands to see if the city could actually take over and protect some of those as natural and educational resources. Allow duplexes in additional areas. I think I heard that they're permitted in presidential areas now. They should be maybe expanded elsewhere. And there maybe should be more flexibility in allowing apartments. It would be useful to understand how many affordable units are needed here in having these discussions. A standard size swimming pool. A solution for parking, a resolution and agreement to solve the problem, which would mean understanding kind of what the problem is. Let's see, eliminate construction in wetlands. There's a perception that that those rules are being violated. Tear downs need to have clear criteria in order to occur. A village is not populated by second homes and commercial properties, it's populated by homes. A more pedestrian friendly downtown and no car streets downtown. Connect up the trail system that has been started, finish it, connect it, make it truly walkable so that people don't have to walk along narrow streets to make connections. And then that there would be such a strong aesthetic here that people would build what is here. They would build to adapt to the community because it is so clear what is here and when they see what the city has accomplished. And then on the third question about clear and objective standards for housing, there is an interest has been discussed by the DRB for many more prescriptive standards such as no snout house, pitched roof requirement, porches, things like that. People think that small size has something to do with the discussion, but it's not clear really yet what that might be. Also, there's a concern that the state could limit, are there ways to interpret the state rule so that it can be done in a Cannon Beach way? When yards are replaced with hard surface, that changes the character of the village. And all of this should acknowledge that Cannon Beach is very, very different from other places. So is there anything missing from those?
It's good inventory.
I think that's been really useful time to spend hearing from you and hearing from everybody kind of in an equal measure. So thank you for your time tonight. Do you want to talk about what happens after this?
Well, I wish I knew, right? Yeah, so I think we had set a course for about every 6 weeks to have another code audit meeting. So that's the goal, is to get on your calendars for another session in 6 weeks. we'll have more back on the code audit, and then we will put this out into a form to the public as well. And so hopefully we'll have some feedback from that, and then we can come back and further discussion on next steps on what we'd like to do.
More specific proposals for how to deal with some of these issues in the code audit. That's
So-
what we'll be coming back with.
I have a question. When you do the survey, is it going to be exactly the same survey that we took? When you do a community survey, or are you going to make some changes?
I think we would make it the same. We would remove the imagery because that did seem to cause a problem, misunderstanding. But otherwise, I think our thought was to keep it exactly the
And
same.
I thought we would attach these questions as well, so that they have what you all answered, but then have these as well, so that they can.
How are you going to sample this community? I mean, how are you going to survey the people?
It'll be at will. The
Yeah.
link will be made available on the city's website.
I would, if the city's interested in a scientific survey, I'd be happy to see if we have any funds to do that, but that's, you know how costly that can be.
Well, I mean, with volunteers, you could just do phone calls, right? You could do, what do you need in a community of 1,500 people to be scientific? Not that many.
Well, it's getting those numbers and.
Do you
doing the
have
call.
them? Do you have access?
We have, through utilities, we might have, we have probably a better email than phones, but we can look into that and see what we have.
Jeff, I was wondering, we talked about having a website where if you have interesting articles or examples of things from other jurisdictions, that they could be posted so that everybody could see them. Is that happening, or?
Yeah, we haven't, we were going to ask you guys how you wanted to do that. I mean, do you all want a website to post in articles for this and just limited to the code audit? And
It's worked well for the TSP, so I think that's a nice way to communicate.
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah, put it all in one.
Because you said that I sent a couple emails to everybody, and I was told that that's actually not completely kosher, that it becomes sort of a
chain meeting.
Yeah, a meeting and not open to the public. So that it wasn't okay to do it that way, but it would be okay to post it on a site that people,
Yeah, so currently, if you go to our website, we have a Housing Matters webpage. I heard on the discussion with the counselors the other day that you guys talked about the Colorado legislation. There's an article on that Housing Matters website on that Colorado legislation. And we've been posting new reports and materials to that website. So we'll do something similar with this. I'll talk with the consultants, and we'll see if we want to have a standalone site or just a Housing Matters type site where we just have code audit under our website. The Cannon Beach TSP site's a separate site. So we can discuss doing that. The other thing is that before this meeting's over, I also want to remind everybody to go to the online open house under the Cannon Beach TSP and do that survey as well, because it's the last kind of open house survey that we'll have as part of that program.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Can I share something? Because I'm not sure I'll be able to share it again. I put this together and I've been hardly touching my computer. Afraid to mess it up.
You can share the screen.
I am able to share screen now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, tell me when you all can see it. Should be there. Did it come through, or are you seeing?
Not yet.
It's not coming through?
No.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to get more technically savvy. I have, and I'll try to bring these to the next meeting. If you look at 108 Harrison, you can see a historic picture of the newer structure next to the 1940s structure. I think it does a great example of showing the importance of materials to the architectural conversation around properties, the importance of landscaping, what parking is doing to landscaping, and certainly scale. And that big house, I have the assessor's building card in front of me here that looks, if I were to guess randomly how large that house was that Marcy showed in that earlier example, I would have thought it was a 4,000 foot house. It's 2,366 square feet. So I think.
Clay, just send that to me, okay?
That's the picture I did send to you, Jeff.
Okay, yeah, email me, yeah, but the other stuff that you're talking
Okay,
about.
I'll send all three of these slides, because I think if nothing else, they'll help us calibrate a little bit some of these points we're talking about. Architecture, materials, square footage.
Perfect.
It did a lot for me, and I'll send it to you so you can share it with the group.
And yeah, so you could put that on the website, right, Jeff?
Exactly, yeah, I'll put all that up there.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And I think it would be good for people to send pictures of what they feel Cannon Beach character is, because it is awfully individual. And I think if we can see what everybody else's impression is, it might be helpful too.
I think we just have to be really sure that anything that's posted is positive,
Right.
so that we don't inadvertently offend the owners of homes that maybe aren't our first choice, so to speak.
I agree, and I think that that's what we're after is the Cannon Beach character, which would be a positive thing.
Random idea, maybe not appropriate for tonight, but again, want to just put it out there. Maybe you guys can think about it. I was thinking, how do we incentivize people to keep or build smaller houses? And economically, in the world we live in, it just makes sense to build larger houses. They are built and sold on a per foot basis. So the larger the house, the more, the financial decision is better. But what if we did something like, and hold your breath here, allowed people with smaller houses, and I'm going to take a random number, it is not anything more than just off the top of my head, 1,000 foot house and under, they could rent that house more often on a short-term basis than if you had a house over X size. You would, one, be limiting the number of short-term renters by the size of the house, but two, incentivizing those owners to keep that house or to build to that standard. Just an idea to noodle on. It came to me as we were talking through keeping historic houses.
I think you'd end up with way more short-term rentals.
No question.
I
You would have more
don't
short-term
think that's what we want in this town. I think it's a terrible idea myself.
Thanks for noodling.
You might eliminate the big party houses though, that are real noxious.
Or they'd spill out into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possible ideas out here. We've heard several in our group talking about housing. I don't dismiss an idea right offhand. I do think that it's important that we are free enough to throw ideas out. I do that all the time, so I want to feel comfortable with it. But so there is a point there that Clay is making. Let's listen to it, and then we'll talk about more details, I'm sure, when we get to that. Because I've had similar concepts, not part of the economic ideas for housing, but not including the short-term rental aspect. And why not? Can we figure out a way to make it more expensive to build bigger per square foot and cheaper to build smaller? That way, those folks that do have money maybe would consider building a better home than a bigger home. But this is all runs into that weird state thing too. So we got to figure that out.
I'm thinking about Clay's and Lisa's comments. Take Clay's comment, but then put a cap on the number of houses that you would have in that pool.
And I that's a good one. I also thought of Clay's comment with Robin's comment, why not make it only, you can only have a short-term rental if it's a historic house? Change, so that means you have to keep a historic house. We'd have to define what historic is. That could really mess up folks.
It would change the dynamic.
Sure.
And the older it is, the more you can charge. I like it.
But no, those are ideas that I think merit some discussion, and maybe we'll throw them
Yeah,
all.
that's the problem. We're still up here and we need to start getting down here and having discussions about some specifics pretty soon.
Oh, we're envisioning right now.
Now, we're still envisioning.
Yeah. We can't get it all in one night if we'd like to.
Can we have the state rule, though? I think that's really important for us maybe to look at that. And if it actually applies to Cannon Beach and its size. Because is this the 2001 thing? This is totally different.
It was passed much earlier by the home builders, actually, back in the 90s, and then it was amended in the 2000s, I believe. But we can provide the legislation to you.
That'd be nice to see that.
Great. Or is the interior knowledge, it's a statewide. What are we governed by federally?
Regarding housing,
Mhm.
Fair housing.
civil rights.
Yes.
Accessibility for housing of us over a certain type and size. What else?
Just, yeah, like you said, fair housing requirements. Yeah. That's
I
all.
think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Very illuminating and interesting, stimulating and exciting.
And thank you guys on the web and going back and forth. I mean, that was an adventure in itself.
It certainly was for me.
Everybody.
Hey, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Didn't use